KC Joyner was on Friday's show. The theme of the week, Casey, was can they run it or are they choosing not to? Question answered against a good front four of the Giants.
Oh, big time answer. They came into the season. I was finally able to catch up on week one numbers. I get a little behind from the Hurricanes, so I finally able to catch up all the season. And Eagles ranked 11th in good blocking rate, which is my metric that measures run blocking effectiveness. They were 11th coming into that game, and they had a 41% good blocking rate, and they had a 41.4% good blocking rate in this game. So they're still going to be a borderline top 10 running team. When you're that good, you ought to try and run the football, and they sure did against the Giants.
They certainly did, and they came out and they established it early. 8 runs in the first quarter, 6 passes, and look, they had a couple of big runs. I think a 17 from Smallwood, another bigger one from LeGarrette Blount. But for the most part, they plotted their way along, but they stuck with it, and I thought they just absolutely wore the Giants down, which allowed them to get a couple of scores late in that game when they really needed to come back.
Yeah, it was not quite like the Titans did in that contest, where the Titans did terrible in the first half against Seattle, and then just wore them down. It was similar though, where you looked in the first half and their good blocking rate was good in the first half, and then the second half you could see the Giants were okay. The Eagles have been pounding them for so long that their linebackers suddenly weren't coming out to fill the gap quite as well, and they even got that 15-yard run by Clement late in the game too in the fourth quarter. So I mean that was one of the plays where it looked like okay, the Giants are tired and now the Eagles are pounding them away. And if you can do that, now the Giants had a front seven that didn't grade out well in this coming into the contest, but man, if you can do that against them, you ought to be trying to do this against everybody.
Really, that's what it was kind of going to be like. All right, the Eagles made the change at left guard. I don't know how much that factored into what they did, although they made another change in the middle of the game. They went from Warmack to Wisniewski, and the numbers on Wisniewski seem to be pretty good. But as a unit, Casey, they really – what kind of day when you looked at the tape and found out and looked over the Eagles' offensive line as a unit, what did they thrive in yesterday?
Yeah, that was the thing. They did a lot of power running and things. I even thought it's funny. Because I thought Warmack I thought he was hit or miss. I saw some failing a couple blocks. And Vaitai also had a block or two where he failed and things. So I'm looking at it going, wow, if you get a 41.4% good blocking rate, and you've got a couple of linemen who are struggling and you're rotating guys in, if you're doing that when the linemen are rotating in and out, just imagine what you could do if you're able to keep all 5 linemen in for the whole game. So I think it's a really good sign that even despite the uncertainty, what happened with the offensive line personnel-wise, I think that could be a 50% good blocking rate team if they keep all 5 out there.
Well, they ran the ball pretty well. Blount. And then, obviously, Smallwood had his best game of the season. They lose to Aaron Sproles in the game yesterday. I want to get your opinion on what that means to their offense. And I'm wondering if losing Sproles, because he's a great blocker, he's their best blocker in terms of pass protection for Wentz, if that forces them to maybe run the ball more, losing Sproles.
Yeah, if you lose the pass, I mean, I think from a running perspective, I think Smallwood can do similar things. I liked the way Clement looked. That he was, it's small sample size, but what he did in the contest, I like the way he looked too. So I think they won't miss anything from the running game. And can they replicate what he does in the passing game as far as pass catching? I think they can, but there's certain types of plays that you can run with him, certain types of speed screens that you're probably going to have to alter and run a little slower developing screen. So it'll be interesting to see if the Eagles can make those work. But yeah, from a pass protection perspective, he also was very good at that. And do you trust the other backs to do that? And if you don't, maybe you have to go to the run by necessity. But again, when you've got a line blocking as well as the Eagles have been blocking this year, I want to lead that running game more often. So maybe Peterson will just have to do that as a necessity.
Casey, what did you think of Carson Wentz overall? It seemed like he's misfiring down the field, but then, of course, he makes that big throw to Alshon Jeffrey at the end to set him up. That was big time.
Yeah, it hit that corner route up there, and that play took time to develop too. That was not a quick developing play to be able to hit that throw. It's some of the same from him. He gets rushed. Sometimes it seems that I see, not from a talent perspective necessarily, although he's a very talented quarterback, but see a lot of Brett Favre, where Brett Favre back in his day, he'd be throwing rocket balls and doing all these crazy things early in the game. And there's that famous NFL Films clip where Mike Holmgren's coming down the sideline saying, "No more rocket balls, calm down, please." I kind of get the same sense from Wentz that sometimes he gets a little antsy, and they need to do things to calm him down. But again, that's another way the running game can help him out.
One thing too is late in the game when they needed to make a couple of plays, he spread the ball around. Ertz seems to be the guy that he's going to. He's got Jeffrey there in the mix. I think they threw a ball late in the game to Aguilar was another guy. I mean, so Wentz is. So the question really is, we're talking a lot about the offensive line. How are they protecting? Because we were kind of surprised, obviously talking about it last week, that the Eagles couldn't get pressure on Eli, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But how did the Eagles' offensive line do against a pretty good Giants pass rush?
They did okay. They didn't do as well as I would have hoped they would have done. They allowed too many pressures in this contest. Pulling up the numbers right now, you would expect the Giants. The Giants have a good front four, but I don't think when you're looking at them that they've done quite as well during the season as they would be. I mean, going into this contest, they rated as they had a defense that were the front seven that rated as a D in my rankings. So I was not surprised to see the Eagles be able to do well against them. But I think that the pass blocking could have been, and again, when you're talking about how many times players they had to rotate out and things, that's kind of a factor too. But the Eagles they allowed pass pressure on 32.4% of their passes in yesterday's game. They ranked 23rd in Week 3. So I think that they had some issues, and it probably was related more to having the players rotate in and out. But I think they're capable of doing better than that.
Casey, a lot of talk going into the game about the Eagles' front four on defense and the Giants and their offensive line, but why, in your opinion, did the Eagles struggle to get to Eli Manning, to struggle to sack the quarterback?
I think they said they wanted to sell it first to stop the run, but why did they struggle to rush the quarterback? Well, part of it was that they decided not to blitz. And they only blitzed yesterday on they had the second from the fewest percentage of blitz attempts in Week 3. They only have the 8.6% blitzes during the entire contest. And in the fourth quarter, they only blitzed on 6.7% of the passes. I think what they said is, if we can get a rush of the front four, that's great. But otherwise, we're going to sit back in coverage. We're going to let Eli be Eli and hope that he's not good Eli. We're not going to give him opportunities by blitzing. We're going to see, is he going to be Eli? Is Odell Beckham going to be what he can be when he's healthy? But we don't know how healthy he was going to the contest. We want to see that. We're going to let these things play out in front of us rather than do a lot of things of blitzing. And hey, it worked to the tune of no points allowed through 3 quarters. Just that fourth quarter looked really bad.
And then what about the Eagles' defense trying to stop the Giants' run game? It seems like they totally took that away.
Yeah. In the first half, I mentioned that good blocking rate. The Giants had a 0% good blocking rate in the first half. They literally did not, according to my grades, have one run with good blocking during that first half, which is why it's incredible. In the end of the second quarter, they've got that play. They're on the 1-yard line. They decide to go ahead and run the football. It's like you haven't had any success the entire first half of the contest. Why in the world would you do this? So it's one of those situations where I question McAdoo's play calling there. I mean, you've proven you can't run the ball, so why don't you go ahead and throw the football? And then the second half, they had a little more success running the football. It was because they're running some traps and running some counter plays, doing things to try to get Philadelphia's aggressive defense out of position. But after a couple, 3 plays of that, the Eagles started shutting that down too, saying that's the only thing you guys can do. Fine, we know how to attack that. We'll shut that down too.
How surprising is that? Cox out, Hicks out. We already know Darby's out. We know McLeod didn't play. I mean, you're running with second and third unit guys out there. What's that say about Jim Schwartz's unit?
I think it says something about his group, but it also says something how bad the Giants' offensive line is. They're not athletic. They're not physical. Even in times when when I graded them out as having good blocking, the holes weren't very big, and especially at the second level, when their guys were trying to block linebackers at the second level, they might get there, but the linebacker would fight through, and there wasn't like they didn't get any push at the second level. They go over and engage the linebacker, but it's 3 yards downfield. The linebacker holds the lineman in place, and bam. Now, instead of being maybe a 10-yard run, 15-yard run, if you move the linebacker, now you're getting a 4 or 5-yard run. So, yeah, I think it says a lot about the Giants' offensive line as much as anything.
Yeah, and we know the Giants are now 0-3, and at this stage of the game, that team yesterday, it's funny, I was talking to my producer Josh off texting him yesterday. I said, this Giants team is awful. That was before the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, they're winning the game, and I'm thinking, well, maybe they're not as bad as I thought, but 0-3, 0-2 in the division, 3 in the conference. What say you on the Giants season?
We had an ESPN Insider roundtable that's going to be posted tomorrow, and one of the questions was, what do you think about the Giants? Do you think are they done, or can they come back? And I looked and said, yeah, the 0-3 record and the conference and division record, and said, wow, They're at Tampa next week. That's not an easy matchup. They've got the AFC West, so they've got Denver, they got Kansas City, they've got Oakland. They also have an away game in Washington, in a short week in Week 12. They still have to play Dallas, Philly, and Washington again. And they've got the Rams at home. The Rams are proven to be one of the better teams. They got Seattle at home. I mean, they've just had this. It's a brutal set of matchups down the road. I'm thinking, can they go 9-4 in the rest of these? Because you got to win 9 at least to probably make a playoffs in the NFC. I don't see it. So I think, as far as playoffs go, I think the Giants are almost out as it goes right now.
0-3 in the conference is a big one, too, because of the tie-breaking situations. They're in really a tough spot here. But, I know we talk a little bit about the special teams here, but the wing punt changes that game, right? Casey, if he just boots that 30 yards, 35 yards, the Eagles don't get a shot there. That's the special teams aspect of it, and Elliott kicking the 61. I know you're down there in the Orlando area. I remember Bryant kicking that 61-yarder against the Eagles for Tampa about 10 years ago, and the feeling of losing a game on a 61-yarder. But when it comes from the other team's punter booting one off the side of his foot, it's a double whammy feeling.
Yep, it is. This is funny. The ESPN has the special teams expected points added metric that measures special teams effectiveness. The Eagles, it was basically a push yesterday. They only gained like a tenth of a point overall, which shows you that they probably weren't very good on special teams until those last plays. And now that punt goes, and that's a big plus. And then to hit the 61-yard field goal, which is very, you can't, if it goes like that. I was thinking back to Tom Dempsey back in 1970 hitting the 63-yarder, thinking, winning that game and turn the Lions season around that year. But it's a big plus because actually Philadelphia before those two plays probably didn't rate very well in special teams, but end of the day they got to push there.
I know the Eagles now at 2-1. They move forward here, and they're going to go to San Diego or L.A. next week. I figured that was coming in one of these conversations. We'll break that game down a little bit down the road here. But 3 weeks in, from what we've seen from them, I don't know what their identity is. Who are the Eagles?
I think they're still figuring that out. I'm looking at their schedule for run defenses they face the rest of the year. I grade run defenses on a color metric where red is tough and yellow is okay and green is favorable. They only have 2 green-rated matchups, so they don't really have favorable run defense matchups, but only have 2 or 3 red-rated matchups the rest of the year, too. Most of their matchups are either okay or favorable. So I'm looking at it going, if I'm Philadelphia, I'm going, okay, why not try to be that kind of power running team? Because we saw what Washington did last night to Oakland. When you've got that kind of a power ground game, it works, and it travels well, too. And Philadelphia's going to – I'd like to see them running the ball late in the season. They got to go to Seattle, L.A., and play the Giants in 3 straight road games in a row. I don't want them throwing the ball in those contests.
They proved they can run the ball, that's for sure, right?
Yeah.
A couple quickies with KC Joyner here, just a couple quick hits on some of the things. Washington last night, what am I supposed to think about them beating up on Oakland?
Bill Walsh used to say that there were 3 or 4 games a year where a team could get really fired up emotionally, and the other 12 games you just have to play to whatever your talent level was. And I think that was one of those games where Washington just decided we're going to get mad about this contest. And so that's it's only one of 3 or 4 that they can do that way. But I don't think that team shows up every single week. But if they do, that's a dangerous club whenever that fired up team shows up.
Were you disappointed in Oakland, or did they just lay an egg? What happened to them last night? Did they get exposed? A lot of times when a team loses, specifically an upset, it's okay, what did the team do that other teams can learn from? Did something happen last night that other teams will be able to pick up on that Washington did?
Yeah, you can take Oakland and punch them square in the mouth. You can go punch them right in the mouth and say, yeah, we can play smash mouth football with you, because Oakland's got to find a way. Hey, look, Amari Cooper's disappeared this year. Crabtree disappeared yesterday. He didn't do anything. Their offensive line didn't play particularly well, and they obviously their defense got pushed around and things. So Oakland likes to be the bully on the block, but if Washington is not, they're a very good team. They're not the biggest bully on the block in the NFL. So I think other teams are going to say, let's go bully on the block and see if we can get the Raiders to play that kind of game, because we can beat them that way.
Thoughts on tonight? Dallas going to, now we saw a lot of road dogs have a tough day yesterday. Road favorites, I should say. Dallas, a road favorite. Should they be concerned?
I have Arizona winning this game, in part because Dallas's offensive line, they lost 2 starters from last year, replaced 2 starters from last year. Last week against Denver, they had their lowest good blocking rate of the past 2 seasons. They did 18.4%, just abysmal. I think that they're still going to have problems running the ball effectively today. Probably be better than last week, but that's a relative term. But I think that's going to be a problem for them. I think that their defense has some big problems too. I think that this Dallas will be a better team in 3 or 4 weeks, but right now this is not a dominant. This is not what the last year's team was.
And that game's tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Biggest surprise, give me a couple of quick hit takeaways that you had from Sunday week 3.
Seattle's offense suddenly showing up. They did not. They pass blocked really well against the Titans front seven. The Titans, what they did in offense, was not surprising. But Seattle to be able to do what they did, that shows that this is a team that their offense is back, even if their offensive line can't run block worth a darn. That was one big surprise. And Pittsburgh laying an egg, but then again, they Tomlin that game like they usually do.
What's the thought with all these? The Falcons-Lions game. What's the thought with those two teams? Two teams that typically fans can't buy into. Is it time to buy into both of them?
I think so, but here's the thing. You look at those teams and say, I always question teams that get into too many shootouts, because you can go through NFL history, best offenses in NFL history, and if you look at games where they get into shootouts, that's where both teams score 24 more points. Even the best teams, offensive teams ever, are like 60%, and most of them were like a 50% or worse. So you can't get into a lot of shootouts. Atlanta's going to get into a lot of shootouts. Detroit's going to get into a lot of shootouts. There aren't a lot of teams in the NFC. They'll be able to do well in the NFC given where the NFC is right now. But I keep looking at those teams going, you guys get into shootouts, it's going to cost you eventually in the playoffs. It did Atlanta last year, and it has Detroit in the past. So I think they still have to shore up defenses before they can go anywhere.
All right, KC Joyner back on Friday with the breakdown of the Eagles and the Chargers, who are 0-3. They lost yesterday 24-10 to the Chiefs, who are undefeated. Another big run by Hunt, another big game for Andy Reid's Chiefs as they go to 3-0. The Eagles, Chargers this Sunday at 4 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Casey, appreciate it, pal.
Thank you, boss.